All right, so today, Wagner. And where he fits into that conflict that we started talking about last class, that became known as the War of the Romantics. So, last class we talked about Schubert and Robert Schumann and Clara Schumann and Brahms. And they're on this side that is referred to as absolute music. They believe that music should be just that. It should be sound. That we shouldn't try to make music do other stuff. It's just there for entertainment. It may make you happy. It may make you sad. It may make you something in between. But it's just supposed to be sound. They really believe that. On the other side, we have Liszt and Wagner. Looks like Wagner, but it's Wagner. And Richard Strauss. We talked about Strauss 2 classes ago, program music. They believed in functional music. So not absolute music, but functional music. Music that did a job. And included on this side would be program music, like we talked about 2 classes ago, right? Instrumental music that communicates information that doesn't have anything to do with music, right? It may be talking about an historical event, or it may be talking about something else, but it's instrumental music telling a story, giving information without using words. Something called music drama that you're going to understand in a minute, which is a development of opera. It's an opera where more stuff is added to it, so they moved on to a different name and thought that they really couldn't be described as opera anymore, so they called it music drama. And then something that was supposed to be very all-inclusive called Gesamtkunstwerk, which roughly translates total work of art. And in that, you get a fusion of multiple arts. The idea is you take music and you join visual art to it. You join painting and sculpture. You join literature and prose and verse and poetry. Sometimes you even join architecture, and you mix it all together into this giant furball. And that by its very nature is going to be more than absolute music, just the sounds. And so on the extreme other end of Schubert and Schumann and Brahms, we have Gesamtkunstwerk, which is where Wagner winds up. Okay, now it's Liszt that first comes up with the idea of program music, and in many ways Liszt was kind of the most vocal person on this side, but it starts with them. It starts on this side. Brahms writes a letter to somebody else that's not on this list that you don't need to know about. But he writes a letter talking about how those guys over there, they've made music sick. Music is experiencing a disease because of them. Well, that letter is leaked and it's published because Liszt was a pretty famous guy. And as soon as that letter gets published, the battle lines are drawn. And it's interesting to see the kind of difference in how they responded to this. On this side, they took a very academic approach in some ways, and they wrote papers and they published books and they offered all this evidence and and documentation and trying to support their position that this is not a good idea to do with music. You just need to let music be alone and just let music be music. But they also made some really vicious attacks on them verbally, and attacked them and talked some. They just didn't criticize. They just didn't criticize them as musicians and the music they were creating. They just didn't criticize that. They criticized them as people on a very foundational level, and it was really ugly. Well, after a while, they had had enough, and they did not respond really academically. They really didn't pay much attention to them at all. When they did, they basically just said, those guys are stupid. So there's this very academic and published response over here going this way. And on the other side, they're just like, they're dumb. And so it was really kind of funny, but this went on for decades. And it became known as the War of the Romantics. And I mean, there are whole books written on the War of the Romantics. And so, you know, you would think, I mean, come on, it's just music. It's just, you know, you like one kind of music, we like another kind of music. Let's just be happy that we got music. You know, you'd think that they could be like that, but no, it got ugly for a long time between these two camps. So we deal with this guy today. We deal with Wagner that looks like Wagner. And it's impossible to deal with Wagner in one class. The only thing that I can hope to do is to give you an idea of why it's impossible to deal with Wagner in one class. So there is a classical scholar at Columbia who is fond of saying that more has been written about Richard Wagner than any other person in human history other than Napoleon and Jesus Christ. And he's probably correct. You do a Google search for the name, just the name Richard Wagner, you're going to be amazed how many results come back in the variety of results. Virtually half of my doctoral degree I spent working with the music of Wagner and writing about Wagner. We are not done with him. It's maybe 150 years ago, but we are not done with him. People are writing and researching and publishing like crazy on Wagner. Now, the Wagner problem. There are those that would believe that Wagner is the highest expression of Western formal art. That is music and other art forms that have a permanent place in Western society. So real quick, the music that you listened to this morning while you were getting ready or walking here to class or something like that, that music that you listened to this morning, is that the same music that you were listening to 3 years ago? Or has it changed? It's different, right? Okay. The music that you listen to, is it like the music your parents or guardians listen to, or your auntie or whoever you grew up with taking care of you? Is it like their music? No, it isn't. It isn't. Okay, so the kind of music that we encounter most in modern society is what can be described as commercial music. Okay, it is music for profit, and the whole industry is designed like a sugar fix, basically. You know how get your Halloween candy and you eat all that Halloween candy, and you get the sugar rush, and it's great, and then all of a sudden you crash after that, or like a caffeine crash, right? You have your coffee, you have your caffeine, whatever it is, and man, you're good to go. You can conquer the world, and then all of a sudden the caffeine goes off, and you feel like crap, right? Well, the modern music industry is designed like that. It's designed like a sugar rush or a caffeine high. You are conditioned to get the newest stuff, to get the new music, to download the stuff, or to share music, which is actually kind of illegal, but to get the newest stuff, and you listen to that, and then you get something new, and the new thing comes along, and you're like, this is cool, and you don't say that, but you know, I'm old, I say that. But you get the newest stuff, and you listen to that, and that's great until the next thing comes along, and you download that, and that's what you play at the party, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. Consume, and the old stuff, just forget about that. Right? That's the cycle. That is commercial music. That is the way industry has structured to make the most money off of us. Well, that music has not become permanent pillars in society. It's disposable music, frankly, because we always want the new stuff. We always want the next thing that the artist is putting out. We always want the new thing, the new bright, shiny object that captures our attention. But for most of this class, we've been talking about music that has been around and continues to be performed, and it may be 200 years old, 400 years old, in some cases 500 years old. And it's been part of society and been a permanent part and a stable part of society for that long. Society as a whole has said, yes, this accomplished a certain thing at a certain level. It deserves to continue to be performed and to be preserved and to be considered. It's music for consideration. Our daily stuff that we listen to while we're getting ready or in the shower, that's music for consumption. The permanent stuff, society says, is music for consideration. You consider it, you think about it, and ideally, it maybe in some ways makes you a better person once you learn enough about it to kind of understand what's going on. All right, back to the Wagner problem. We have music that he created that many people, I'm not going to say the majority of people, but many people who know this kind of music and who deal with this, both as performers and as academics, they feel that Wagner is the highest expression of Western art. It's the greatest accomplishment in Western art. And that would be fine. That could just be debated in a interesting way if it weren't for the person who created it. Because the person who created it, Richard Wagner, he was a monster. He was a horrible, horrible person. Now, the way I teach this class, I try to just give you the facts, and I try not to interject my own opinion and say this is good, this is bad, this person was good, this person was bad. I try to stay away from that. Even though lots of things are going on in my mind while I'm talking about them, I try to stay away from that and just give you the facts, because that's my job. This is a history class. It's just my job to give you the facts. No one can remain neutral on Wagner. So I have to step out of that for this class, because he was horrible. He was a monster. We do not have time to go into just how bad he was and all the things that he did or didn't do. But as we go along through the material, I will probably wind up pointing out some things and referring to some things that he did. And yeah, I can guarantee you that if I was able to give you if I had time to give you just kind of a general outline of the person that he was and how he lived his life, every single one of you would be offended by his life and the choices that he made and how he chose to live. And I can guarantee you that none of you would hold up Wagner as a model for your own life. Oh, I want to be like Wagner, said no good human being ever. Okay, it's just the way it is. The majority of human beings that have lived on this earth in human history have been good in comparison to this man. And to a great degree, because of the constraints of this class, you just have to trust me on that. But I hope that I've appeared neutral enough for the majority of this semester that you can say, well, if he's actually saying that kind of stuff, he must have good reason for it. Believe me, I do. Wagner. You need to write two things on the top of this handout. You need to write exam material, or something that tells you, yeah, this is going to be on the exam. I need to hang on to it and I need to look at it. So exam material, and read the whole thing. Read the whole thing. Because I am not going to go over the whole thing today. You're responsible for the whole thing, but I am only going to hit the high points. Now, I would suggest that the things I talk about today will almost certainly be on the final. Okay, but other things from here on this page could be on the final too. So just be aware of that. All right, here we go. Look at the third chunk of stuff, like a paragraph, where it says early Wagner operas. Okay, early Wagner operas. 3 titles. All right, don't be concerned by the word that looks like die. In German, that's just a word, just a form of the word the or the. Okay, so that's like saying the Hochzeit or the Feen. All right, it just happens to be DIE. So don't worry about that. The other thing you need to write on this page is you need to write, be able to identify all titles as Wagner opera. It's probably a shorter way to say that, but be able to identify all titles as Wagner opera. So what does that mean? That means that if you see a title of an opera on the front or the back side of this page, you need to be able to, when you see that, you need to be able to think, oh, that's a Wagner opera. You may not need to know anything else about it, but you needed to be able to sort. So if I were to give you a list of like 4 other compositions and the title of a Wagner opera and ask, which is the Wagner opera, you would be able to select the correct one. Okay? You've had to do sorting things before. You'll have, I can guarantee you'll have to sort with titles of Wagner opera. All right. Now go down to where it says his first major opera. His first major opera. Underline or circle the title there, Rienzi. Middle of that first line of that paragraph. Rienzi. Circle Rienzi. Then go to the last sentence in that paragraph where it says it is the earliest Wagner opera that is occasionally performed. Underline that. So link Rienzi, and it's the earliest Wagner opera that's at least occasionally performed. The other stuff, nobody does that. Some of them don't even survive. Okay, Rienzi is the earliest one that occasionally gets performed. Then the next one, Flying Dutchman, Die Fliegende Holländer. In this opera, you need to understand that the important thing about this opera, he introduces something called leitmotif. Now, if you'll remember back to the beginning of the semester, we talked about motives in music and how a motive is the shortest number or the smallest number of notes in a piece of music that creates recognition in the person listening to it. Okay, so we did a couple of things. I did this. I played a note on the piano. Play 2 notes. 3 notes. All I'm doing is sitting here banging on the piano. But if I add a particular 4th note to that, suddenly there's recognition. Oh, that thing. Okay. So that particular motive, 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's a motive. The other one we used. What is that? What is that? Jaws, sharks, right? Right, that's the Jaws motive. So what a leitmotif does in a Wagner opera is you get a short little collection of notes, and that's supposed to make the audience think about something. Why is that important? It's because it frees Wagner and frees the singers up, but they don't have to sing about anything. You can make the audience think something without somebody on stage having to sing it. And so that opened up a whole world of possibility, right? In the Jaws movies, you hear this. Does somebody have to say, oh, the shark's coming? No, nobody has to say that because you know shark's coming. Somebody's going to die. All right, that's how leitmotifs work. And Wagner is really the one who perfects this way to make this work, how to do this. All right, you can read about that. You can read about that. Go down to near the bottom of the front side where it says Tristan und Isolde was written next. Tristan und Isolde. This was an epic tragedy about love, despair, and death. And the opera presents a Celtic legend about a faithful knight who is in love with his lord's wife. So think back to medieval times and knights and nobility. And so there was a noble lord that had a knight in his employ, and the knight was going out doing knightly things. All right, whatever knights did. And the problem was in the story was that the knight was in love with the lady of the house. The knight was in love with his employer's wife. Okay. Now, knight never does anything. Knight leaves her alone. So loving from afar, forbidden love, loving from a distance. What does that sound like that you've already encountered in your education before? It sounds like, what kind of love? Courtly love. Anybody remember that term? Courtly love. All right, like Chaucer, Canterbury Tales. So courtly love, loving someone, but maybe not even being able to talk to them. Just being in love with them, but being in love with them from a distance and never being able to have a relationship with that person. That was forbidden love. That was courtly love. And we get that in Tristan und Isolde. We've had it in other operas as well, but it's really obvious in Tristan und Isolde. And here we have this being written at the same time that Wagner in his real life was in love with his best friend's wife. So you can see the connection. He's got his best friend, he's in love with his wife. And so the opera is reflecting that. Now, this is possibly the only time in Wagner's adult life, at least the only time that I'm aware of, that when he was chased, when he was chased sometimes, but when he was faced with a moral decision, should I try to steal his wife or should I leave his wife alone? He chose the right thing. Perhaps the only time in his life, he chose the right thing. He left his best friend's wife alone. That was rare for Wagner. And I don't just mean sexual things and the relationship things. I mean, the man is twisted in just about every aspect of his life that you can imagine. But in this particular case, he left his best friend's wife alone, just like in Tristan. Look at the backside. Go down to the third chunk where it starts between Lohengrin and Tristan. Okay? Between Lohengrin and Tristan and Isolde, Wagner began a musical project that would take him 26 years to complete and to come to define him as an artist. A 4-opera, or by this time, music drama, cycle that would become known as the Ring of the Nibelungen. It's sometimes casually referred to as the Ring Cycle, or sometimes just the Ring. So this is what Wagner is associated with. If you talk to an academic that deals in this kind of music, or you talk to a professional performer that deals with this kind of music, you say Wagner, immediately everybody's automatic knee-jerk response in their mind is Ring Cycle. This is what Wagner is about. There's all this other stuff too, and all these other operas and all this other personal baggage that he carried with him, with his life. But Wagner is about the Ring Cycle. It tells a story on a scale never before attempted on stage, presenting about 18 hours of music over a total of 4 nights. The Nordic myth of the demise of some fatally flawed gods is retold, with the destruction of the universe and its rebirth thrown in for good measure. So this was quite an adventurous undertaking for the 1800s. Okay, he wants the destruction of the universe to happen on stage. They didn't have a lot of special effects back then, so it took a lot of creativity, and he came up with some remarkable ideas for the time. Problem was, there weren't any opera houses that could stage this, that could do his ideas. They just weren't equipped, physically equipped. They didn't have the ability to do that. So he realizes, I've got to build an opera house. So I can build an auditorium so this thing could be performed. So when he needed money, he did what he always did. He stole the money and started building the opera house. Well, unfortunately, the money that he stole and embezzled and borrowed with no intention of returning, that ran out before the place was finished. Well, about this time, the King of Bavaria had become very interested in Wagner's music. And Wagner was needing money to finish this opera house so he could perform this Ring Cycle with all the special effects that he wanted to have. Well, King of Bavaria wasn't just interested in his music. King of Bavaria was interested in Wagner as well, and so and began to express romantic interest in Wagner. And Wagner was married. He was on his second wife, and that's a story in and of itself. But he was on his second wife, and was not interested in the romantic advances of the king. However, he realized, I need somebody to pay for this opera house. So he proceeds with returning these romantic advances from the king, and in order to get the king to pay for the rest of building the rest of the opera house. Now, what his wife thought about that, we don't really know a lot about what his wife thought about that particular aspect of his life. We know what she thought about a lot of other things that he did, but we don't specifically know about the thing between him and the King of Bavaria. We'll just leave that with the statement of he got his opera house finished. So he now had an opera house to perform the Ring Cycle. Yeah, you can. It's still standing. There's still performances of multiple Wagner operas there in Bavaria. Every year when there is a global pandemic, and The ring cycle operas are certainly the most difficult ticket to come by. The last time I checked, and it was a while ago, but the last time I checked, if you wanted to see an opera in the ring cycle at this opera house that Wagner had built in Bavaria, there was an 11-year waiting list for tickets. So you buy your ticket and you wait 11 years for your performance of that one opera that you wanted to see. So it's a thing. All right, go back to the list. Go back to the list of the operas. Okay, starting with Das Rheingold. So the operas of the ring cycle in order. Start with Das Rheingold and draw an arrow from Das Rheingold down to Die Götterdämmerung. Draw an arrow down from Das Rheingold down to Die Götterdämmerung. Then write order of the story. Order of the story. Now, someplace else, like on the other side, draw an arrow from Götterdämmerung up to Siegfried. Oh, sorry, up to Das Rheingold. From Götterdämmerung, an arrow up to Das Rheingold. That arrow is talking about something different. So Wagner was traveling through Europe, crossing Europe. This was one time he wasn't being chased. At one point, he was chased across Europe by an entire army. This was not one of those times. And so he had time to do a little bit of reading. He came across this old book of ancient Scandinavian mythology. Okay, so Scandinavian, the ancestors of the people in Sweden and Norway and the cold places up there. They had their own ancient mythology, their own ancient mystical religious beliefs. And Wagner finds this book talking about some of these stories. And he says, you know what, this would make a great opera. This would be a great story for an opera. In particular, the thing that he was interested in was the final end of these ancient Scandinavian gods, how they died, how they came to their end, and why they came to their end. And so he's like, I want to tell that story. So he writes an opera. That turns out we know that as Die Götterdämmerung. That translates the twilight of the gods, the end of the gods. Okay. Well, he looks at it, he's written it, and he looks at it and he says, okay, this is the story I wanted to tell, which, by the way, is the same basic story. You know, back probably 6-7 years ago in the Marvel universe, there were the Thor movies. There was the movie Thor, and then there was one that came after that called Ragnarok. Anybody remember that? So all right. What's that? So was it Norse? Ragnarok is based on the exact myth that the ring cycle is based on. Okay, so they both changed it. People that made that movie, they changed the myth a little bit. They worked with it. They just took some license and said, let's just change this a little bit, make it be like this. But it's basically that same ancient Scandinavian myth. Wagner uses that same myth in the ring cycle. So the ring cycle, a little bit different, but if you watch the whole thing, if you sat through all 18 hours of it, you would see the connection between the Thor movie and the Ragnarok movie and say, okay, yeah, I see that. Well, there's that same character. He's running around doing this thing, and there's that thing, and you'd see some of the same stuff, okay? But he has a problem, because in the 19th century in Germany, people thought the same way that in Western society we think today in the 21st century about mythology. As soon as you say mythology, most people automatically think, oh, Greek and Roman mythology. You know, the Greek gods and the Roman gods, you know, that's what we think. That's what they thought. That's what the Germans back then thought too. Problem is, Wagner is writing about mythology that nobody knew anything about. And so he's got all of these individuals in his opera running around doing all of these weird things, and nobody was going to understand who they were, where they came from, or why they were doing the things that they were doing. So he finally decides, I've got to explain it. I've got to explain what's going on here. So he writes another opera. he writes Siegfried. And Siegfried does a really good job of explaining Götterdämmerung and who these people were and why they were doing the things that they were doing. But he has a new problem. He has new people in Siegfried, and they're running around doing all these weird things, and nobody's going to understand why. So he decides, I've got to explain that. So he writes Die Walküre. And Die Walküre does a really good job of explaining Siegfried. But Die Walküre is in some ways the weirdest one of them all, because we have in Die Walküre, we have 12 warrior goddesses who are born to, so the head god who is married he goes and has 12 daughters with the earth goddess, who is not his wife. The earth goddess, by the way, has no legs and no arms. She's just torso. But anyway, he has, I'm not making this up. He has 12 daughters with her. And those 12 daughters, who are now his children and not his wife's children, and his wife hates him because for obvious reasons. Those 12 daughters, their job is to go to all the battlefields on Earth and collect the souls of dead heroic soldiers, warriors, and take their souls to this new castle that Wotan, the head god, has had built in the sky. And it's going to be their fortress. It's where they're going to make their last stand. He knows that something is coming that's going to attack them, and that they have to be prepared, and that they have to have some place to make a last stand. And so he has Valhalla built. That's it. And Valhalla is the castle in the sky. And so the Valkyries are supposed to collect all these souls of these brave warriors, take the souls to Valhalla to help the gods defend against this attack that's coming. Okay, so that's their job. Then we also have the greatest hero of all time, who is born to a brother and sister who fall in love and have him as their child. Yeah, okay, so major incest going on in Die Walküre, and it's not only this thing like, oh yeah, they're having sex. It's like, it's presented as this great thing. It's a great love story between this brother and sister, and they are deeply in love, and they are the parents to the greatest warrior of all time, who is Siegfried, by the way, who's coming in the next opera. But they have Siegfried. Now, we also have the problem of Brunhilde, who is Wotan's favorite daughter, and also a Valkyrie, but was not the child of Erda. Okay, the torso. She was not a torso child. She actually sprang from Wotan's head, fully mature and full size. That's how she came into existence. And so because Wotan created Brunhilde with no help from anybody else, she is his favorite daughter, and he loves her more than the others. And they realize it. Everybody knows that Wotan loves Brunhilde. That's her name. Loves Brunhilde more than the other daughters. But the other daughters are kind of okay with it. They don't, it's like, it's okay. When, if you're a parent, don't love one kid more than the others. Just work on that, okay? Don't have a favorite. Bad things happen, like the destruction of the universe. So still in Walküre, a lot of stuff happens. Brunhilde disobeys Wotan. She does something that he told her not to, and he's furious, and he's going to kill her, even though she's his favorite daughter. He's going to kill her. Until at the very end of Die Walküre, she's on the run. For a lot of Walküre, she's on the run, trying to escape from Wotan, which he's the most powerful god. She's not going to get away, but she tries. And so he finally catches her at the end of the opera, and he's going to kill her. But she says, "I love you so much. I was only doing what I knew you couldn't do, or you were not allowed to do." And that was the truth. He wanted to do something, but because of all of the manipulation and the machinations and the plotting and the scheming that he had done to come to power, he couldn't do this one thing. And I'm not even going to go into the one thing that he wanted to do that he couldn't do. So she went and did it for him, even though he said, don't do it. And so he says, yeah, you know, you're right. And I do realize that you love me, and you did it out of love. You disobeyed me out of love. It's a complicated thing. So what he does is he puts her, instead of killing her, he puts her to sleep on a rock. And she's going to be asleep and surrounded by magic fire until a hero comes who is powerful enough and brave enough to make his way through the magic fire and rescue her off the rock. Okay? So that's how we end Die Walküre. That hero turns out to be the incestuous child of the brother and sister who earlier in their opera had him. But by the time we get to Siegfried, he's all grown up and he's interested in women now. And he goes and he finds Brunhilde, who at the point, it's another interesting fact, at the point he finds her, she is the first woman in his life that he has ever seen who was not his aunt. So you can imagine he'd be interested. Anyway, they fall madly in love. And I have a synopsis for you of the rest of it that you can actually read while we are watching and listening to some of this. This is not exam material, but if you want to have a little bit better picture of what's going on besides all this crazy stuff, this is the story. You can leave it behind or you can take it with you. It doesn't matter. The synopsis is not exam material. And this is just the basics, okay? This is not even the Cliff's Notes. This is just the very, very basics. This is an 18-hour story. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens besides this. You don't know anything about the man that turns into the dragon, and you don't know anything about drinking bird blood, and you don't know about all the other stuff that's going on. Yeah, but this helps you a little bit. All right, here we go. This is, oh wait, no, not bird blood. It was dragon blood. Sorry, correction. You didn't hear anything about drinking the dragon blood. It's the bird. The bird then talks to him. After he drinks the dragon blood, there's a bird that comes and talks to Siegfried, who understands the bird. These are the opening bars of Rheingold. This is the prelude because he has renamed his overtures preludes. There we go. All right, so this is a production from 2011 in New York. It opens with the orchestra playing the beginning instrumental introduction, which is E flat. That's all you hear for a long time. And then you finally get to hear the chord of E flat major eventually. That just sustains for a very, very, very long time and does different things until finally we get some singing. And the story opens up in the Rhine River, literally in the Rhine River, underwater, with three, you can think of them as mermaids. They are river mermaids. And they're called Rhine maidens in the story. And their job is to guard a lump of magic gold in the bottom of the Rhine River. Wotan has told them, guard that gold. You cannot let anybody get that gold, okay? Because he knows that he has constructed all of his power through all this scheming and all this lying and all this deception. But the magic gold, he knows that somebody makes a ring out of that magic gold and wears it, they become master of the universe because the ring isn't like all powerful, okay? So now where have you heard that before? So what happens? Rhine maidens are not taking their job very seriously, and somebody tricks them, and they lose the gold, and he runs off with the gold.
Right. Now, it's really their fault on multiple levels because the guy comes along, they don't think he's very handsome, and they mock him and they make fun of him, and he just wants to talk to them and hang out with them for a little while, and they're like, how can we possibly hang out with somebody as ugly as you? They're really rude, and so he's like, well, fine, that gold down there looks interesting. I'm just going to take your gold. And they freak out. He grabs the gold and makes away with it. And that sets everything in motion. As soon as he takes that gold, events are kind of, die is cast. And events are set in motion for the ultimate destruction of these mythological gods because there's a curse on the gold, there's a curse on the ring, and everybody who possesses it will wind up dead. Everybody who has the ring will wind up dead, except for the Rhine maidens who were supposed to guard it. So the rest of the 4 operas is driven by people plotting and scheming and lying and trying to get control of the ring. And then when somebody does, then they get killed and somebody else gets control of the ring. So the ultimate destruction of these gods is all about a quest for power and the obsession with holding on to power, basically, is what it's about. And that's what brings them down. That's what brings about their destruction, is desire for ultimate power and being willing to sacrifice anything to hold on to that power, and that sacrifice ultimately winds up with them all dead. The beginning, this low note that you hear at the beginnings is actually supposed to symbolize the initial creation of the universe. So he was having to go back further and further and further to explain the story. He just says, to heck with it, I'm going to go to the beginning of the creation of the universe. I can't, quantum theory hadn't been developed yet, so he couldn't go before that. There it is. The universe exists. All right. If you're reviewing this on video, this video and audio in class doesn't record very well, so you probably just need to advance past this until you see lights come back on again. Listen for how this builds, and things are just stacked on each other. It builds and builds and builds until finally the voices, when they start to sing, it's almost inevitable. They must almost inevitably start to sing when they do, because there's no other choice. There's no other place you can go.
now in the original language, in the German, as soon as they started to sing, there is a rhyme scheme, a verse with some alliteration that was only used in ancient German and Scandinavian poetry. And so when the Germans back in the 1800s heard this for the first time, as soon as they started to sing, the audience would have realized, oh, he's drawing on something that's really old here. This is supposed to take place in the ancient past. This is some sort of legendary time that we don't know a whole lot about. It's very mysterious. And they would have immediately, from the rhyme scheme, they would have immediately realized that, oh, this is about Ragnarok. This is back in the time of the Nibelungen. Here's the dude that just wants to hang out. Or maybe more, but really just wants to hang out. All right, so they're mean. And in their teasing and in their mocking, he gets mad and decides to steal their gold. Now, we got other things to look at, so we're going to go to the end. Oh. A whole lot of stuff happens. This will work. All right. So this is now the end of Rheingold. And the main gods are evacuating to Valhalla, where they're going to make their final stand. And Wagner's instructions are the way they get there is they walk up a rainbow. Now, why he thought that was a good idea with what they were capable of doing back in the 1800s, I don't know. But this is a 21st century solution to walking up a rainbow. When the singing ends, and by the way, the most important thing in a Wagner opera is really the orchestra. The singers really only clarify what's going on. There is so much symbolism happening in the orchestra that that's where the real information is being communicated. You just have to learn the opera and learn the music to really know what's going on. So we have Wotan here. He is the head god, and he's the one who has lied and cheated and schemed and done all these things, including lied and cheated and scheming in order to build Valhalla, which is where they're going. This is his wife here, who hates the Valkyries that haven't been born yet, but he's about to take care of that. And this is the god of fire. And he is the one who winds up in the end, he is the one who winds up destroying Valhalla and destroying all of them. And it's left as an open question at the end of Götterdämmerung, the end of this whole thing, whether he survives or not. And so everybody dies except for maybe him and the Rhine maidens, because they're ultimately back in the River Rhine. And while they are rude and while they are stuck up, we also find out they're not as naive as they seem, because in the end, the very last thing that happens in the very last opera is they murder someone. So they're not as innocent as maybe they seemed. So, a little bit of the end of Rheingold. With sound. those are the Rhine maidens. They're off stage. It's supposed to it's sounding from a distance because they're supposed to be underwater. They're complaining that they've lost the gold. He knows because they lost the gold that basically they're all going to die. He's the only one at this point. He's trying to tell them that they're going to go make their stand in Valhalla and that it's going to be okay. But he knows at this point, because he doesn't have the gold, he knows that they're going to die unless he can get it back. And he tries for the next 3 operas to cheat people out of the gold and to steal it back, and he's never able to do that. So that's the end of Rheingold. So everything is set at this point. The crisis is set. Not all the lying, because there's a lot of lying that happens after this and all the deception. Basically their fate, even if all of the gods don't realize it yet, their destruction is set. This is now towards the end of Die Walküre. And it is the most famous music out of the Ring cycle, some of the most famous music Wagner ever wrote, but certainly the most famous music out of the Ring cycle. You will probably have heard it someplace before. That's the brother and sister yeah, that's them. This particular section of the opera is called the Ride of the Valkyries. We're introduced to these warrior goddesses as they approach a battlefield to collect the souls of these fallen warriors. They ride on flying horses. Again, another severe problem in the 1800s. How do you have flying horses on stage? Many different ways to try and solve this problem have been tried over the years, over the past 150 years. Most of them have failed. This is one of the best. It's done symbolically here, and this is one of the best solutions I've ever seen. And as soon as the audience realizes that what they have done and how they have dealt with the problem of the flying horses, they applaud. But you will have heard this music before, whether it was in the movie Apocalypse Now, or whether it was in, even a couple of years ago, there was a Doritos commercial that used this music without the singing. You've heard this. Okay, there's just been an intermission, okay, and they're getting ready to start the third act. Conductor acknowledges the applause. Curtain hasn't gone up yet. Here we go. You've heard this. You will have heard this before. Sections is symbology of their flying horses. They're loud, always. Calling to one of her sisters that stood in the air on a horse. She responds. So they're going to talk about day-to-day things like where are you going to put your horse. Then they start to talk about their job, who died and who's going to take whose soul. And then they start to talk about the problem with Brunhilde and Wotan. And are they going to try to support Brunhilde, their sister, or are they going to and anger Wotan and maybe have him come after them as well? Because at this point they think Brunhilde is going to die. Or are they going to stand by their father and not help Brunhilde? So there's a long discussion that goes on about that. And while there is more of Valkyria I'd like to show you, we need to go to the last opera, get to Damaron. We are going to skip. We're going to skip Siegfried altogether. I hope this is the right disc. Thought I could do this without the lace. Nope. Yeah. All right. So we're going to jump past about 5.5 hours of opera. And all the lies and all the murders. Go probably about here, and I will have to Find exactly where I want. Go with that. All right. So at this point, this is not where we're starting, but at this point, so Siegfried was the incestuous child of the brother and sister. He found Brunhilde on a rock, and he is able to rescue her. They fall madly in love, but since they're not related, that's okay. And but in order for her to be with him, remember she's a god because she was the daughter. She was created by Wotan. In order to be with him, she has to give up her immortality and become mortal, which she does. The problem then becomes that someone, and this is not exactly what happens, but in order to explain it in the time we have, I'm just going to say someone casts a spell on Siegfried, and he falls in love with somebody else. Only Brunhilde doesn't know that somebody has cast a spell on him and is manipulating him. She just thinks that he's unfaithful. And so not only has she lost the man that she's in love with, she gave up her godhood and her immortality for it. And now you can imagine she's mad. Well, she's mad enough that she has him killed. But as soon as she has him killed, she's sorry. And that's basically where we're picking this up here. He's dead. And so she is taking the ring from him and putting it on her finger as if it's a wedding ring. And they're going to put him on a funeral pyre and cremate his body. She calls for her horse and rides her horse into the flames and commits suicide by burning herself to death and her horse. And they are united. They're united in death. Their love fuels the flames of the fire that shoots up into the heavens, engulfs Valhalla, destroys it, and burns and kills all of the gods. And that takes us to almost the very end of the opera. All right, she's already got, all right, we're almost to where I want to go. All right, we're gonna have to go there. With this equipment, I can't get any closer. So she is about to light the fire that will cremate his body. She's still sorry. Remember why an opera singer sounds the way they do. She does not have a microphone. There are 90 instruments in that orchestra that she's fighting to be heard over. Standing here. It's the only major character. Watching really close what she's doing with that ring she's supposed to put on her finger. Now remember, anybody who has the ring dies. She's about to kill herself. Leitmotif. time, but what happens is that the Rhine River overflows, puts out the fire. The Rhine maidens recover the ring from Brunhilde's dead hand, and this guy here tries to get it from them, and they have learned their lesson, and this time they drown him and kill him. And then so they take the ring back down to the bottom of the Rhine. So we wind up ending everything exactly where we started out 18 hours ago with magic gold at the bottom of the Rhine, and everything is over. That's what the ring is. What was that? That's what the ring is. It's a cycle, the ring, circular plot. It's all about a ring. It's a circular plot, and it's a cycle. Exactly.